Happy Wine Wednesday, everybody. What are you sipping on, Holly?
I've got Bombay Sapphire with lavender lemonade.
Ooh, Holly's getting all fancy on us. I've got my usual Chardonnay. Um, if you're just listening instead of watching, we've got Ray and Theresa with us. Theresa is our guest tonight. I labeled this Wine Wednesday Dwarf versus Erectus because she has kept both, and we're going to hear a little bit about her experience with both and her theories about all that. Also, guys, I'm wearing, I don't know if I can keep it on the whole time. It's soft, but it's warm. But I've got on my Seahorse gear. Couldn't find my shirt, Holly, so I'm glad you didn't wear yours because I couldn't find mine.
It's too cold for a t-shirt here.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, anyways, I hope all of you have had a great week. Sorry we weren't here last week. I think, Holly, did you ever get anything posted or no?
I did. Yeah,
Okay.
I did last week.
Everybody just had everything going on, so nobody could be here. So, yeah, sorry we weren't here last week. But I'm sure people will jump in later. If you have any questions as we go, even if it's not related to the topic, of course, we'll get to it eventually. So feel free to ask. But Theresa, all right. Well, first off, what do we have behind you?
This is my 300-gallon aquarium that I've had for many years now, and I have 6 Erectus seahorses in there right now. And as we speak, I have a male who's, I think he's pretty gravid, and he's been doing some twitching tonight, so I'm wondering if his moment is coming soon.
Gotcha. I think look for the warning fry. That's what always tipped me off is you'd see
the warning
fry, and then all of a sudden you've got a couple hours or
explosion.
Ray, how long do you think it takes from the warning fry to the birth of them all? Do you have any idea?
Well, mostly the warning fry come a day before, but occasionally I've had them 2 days before.
Gotcha.
But most times it's a day before.
Yeah.
Mine were always a day before.
Gotcha.
Wow. Very interesting. I'll see if I can see a single fry in that mess.
I see Shyla. Hello. I want to know if you got your shirt, Shyla. Let me know in the comments. And then, okay, so Theresa, let's start way back when. How long ago did you keep the dwarf seahorses?
Oh gosh. It's probably going to be about a year since I've had them, pretty close to a year now. So I had them for a few years, running through several generations. But I think my downfall was I had so many of them in the tank and debating, do I go to a bigger tank? And then the thought of setting up another tank just threw my husband through the roof. So I didn't go that route. And I think whatever natural things build up in a tank, it was probably just too hard to keep up with it. And they succumbed to something. I don't know what it was, but it was going very strong for a few years for sure.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Something happened to my camera. I don't know. I disappeared for a minute. Did I disappear on your guys' end?
On my end you did, but it's okay.
Okay. Anyhow,
now she did.
Yeah, now she's disappeared. I don't know if she's talking or not.
Actually, the biggest problem that I had was not knowing that the dwarfs basically stopped reproducing when they were about a year old. And here I was giving off all the offspring and keeping the more mature ones until all of a sudden I realized the population was going down. And it ended up, I still had a few more of the younger ones, and I had to start rebuilding from those younger ones and get rid of the older ones.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Ray. I didn't have the opportunity to notice that because, like I said, I was keeping them all in there. So I was having generations after generations reproduce in there. So
I was keeping about 50 in a 5. And so when that population was, of course, more than that, then that's when I'd be selling them off. I didn't know at the time that habit was that they weren't going to reproduce much after that approximate year. I found out
Mhm.
afterwards that that is generally a fact, but it took me a long time to build up again, and before I could sell any more because I had to work with just the few that I had left. And but eventually I got to build back up, and then I started saying, oh, "What the heck? I'm doing all this work, but I do it all with my other species.
Mhm.
Like raising the fry on these other ones is just like having dwarfs."
Right.
And so I finally said, "That's enough."
So Ray, real quick,
So after I
real quick.
got it all built, and I dropped it.
Yeah, yeah, right. So one thing real quick, and
Hey,
That was quick.
yeah.
It really was quick.
hey, I'm gonna just go with this camera because I don't know what's going on with that camera. All right, sorry guys. Ray, what I was gonna ask is, what did you say about a year? So they stop, they reproduce like crazy, and then after a year they stop. Is that what you said?
In around a year, and
Okay.
it's not an exact figure. You know, some will do it maybe a little bit before a year, some will do it a little later. Mainly because seahorses, like people, have individuals have different rates of maturity.
Gotcha.
But when they get to a certain point, apparently they just stop in the reproducing. And some of them may not be a total withdrawal from it, but they'll, if they do reproduce, there'll be very little.
Gotcha.
So, and because at that point I'd had a lot of different species of seahorses, but never dwarfs, and I didn't have anybody that was really pushing it on seahorse.org on the forum there. There's a few people that would try and help me out when I got started in that, but it turned out that wasn't long before I knew as much or as the majority of longer term keepers there, and I knew more than a lot of other dwarf keepers at that point. But mainly, I guess I'm basically applied what I'd learned with keeping the reed-eye and Erectus fry. Well, actually, it was only reed-eye fry at that point. I hadn't had Erectus at that point. And I just applied what I learned there to growing the dwarf population up.
Well, and I know that Dan did the same thing. Like he treated dwarfs just like, any other species fry. But of course, Dan was using the huge tubs. What fascinates me is that people like you and Theresa kept them in smaller aquariums and had so much success. That's crazy to me because, well, we'll get into that.
Well, I think that's part of. I think that's probably the reason why we're successful. If you're keeping them in small tanks, like for me, I never worried about any filtration of any kind. I just did water changes.
Right. So,
and I raked up. I didn't use filtration as such, but I believe that you had to remove the depleted nutrient level live food before you feed again.
mhm.
And it was a pain in the butt. So I got some mini filters. They're just tiny little things. And I hooked them up to a timer so that I'm trying to remember now whether it was an hour or hour and a half after feeding, the timer would kick in and turn this on here, and it would start filtering out the brine shrimp with the water there, so that by the time feeding came in the evening, then most of that was all gone now. And so I could put the nutrient-rich new food in and have them eating only on that instead of on both the new and the old.
Gotcha.
A lot of people can't be bothered after they've been in it a while. They can't be bothered taking out the older food And I think in the end, that's part of their downfall.
I
Gotcha.
never
Well,
took out the old food. I never took out the old food. I just
Yeah, see,
always,
so well, we're gonna hear your theories in just a second, and I'm jumping to you right now, because yeah, I want let's back up a little teeny bit. What? Let me ask Ray one more question, and then we're gonna go straight
Sure.
to Theresa. But Ray, so when with you using this mini filtration system where you're just removing the old brine shrimp, did you
Yeah.
still do daily 100% water changes, or did that?
Oh, no. No, well, I went through a few different stages, but I never did a daily full change. I guess I evolved after a period of time. About every other day, I change out 50%.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I did go through different experimental periods trying to find a point that I thought would be better. But when I went, I think 3 or 4 days, and I did that for 4 or 5 months, and then I started having some bacterial problems.
Mhm.
So I went back to the 2-day mark, and then I think again. Then after that, I tried 50% daily, but I, being lazy, I gave up on that because it seemed like 50% every other day was doing the job.
Well, figuring it out is part of the process. And I forgot, I should have mentioned too, Holly kept dwarfs too. I forgot. All three of these guys have kept dwarfs. Everybody but me. I did not. But let's jump to Theresa. Okay, so what I was trying to ask you, and I got cut off 3 times, sorry, is what made you even decide to get dwarf seahorses? Like,
yeah, there's a little bit of a history that I'm connected with them. They used to be available in the back of magazines when I was
Yes.
a little girl, mail order, and my dad used to buy them for me.
I'm not trying to interrupt you, but I just saw 2 seahorses kind of tumbling behind you. So really cool.
Yeah,
Go on.
yeah.
Sorry.
The other male, who I don't think is pregnant, is pretty active right now. So
Got you.
he's hunting down a female.
We'll play spot the seahorse behind her.
Yeah,
Go on,
it's
Theresa. Sorry.
fun. No, it's fun. So when I had gotten to a certain point, again, I had them on and off, and every time I had them, I learned more. And it was a number of years before I went back to them, and just trying to read what I could. So much had changed from when I first started using them, and I felt like I was doing the opposite of what everybody used to say with keeping dwarf seahorses when I first started keeping them. Of course, as a kid, I had no idea, and they didn't live very. But so I used a 10-gallon aquarium. I actually had a mini power hang on the back power filter with a sponge on the intake. I used an AquaClear 70, but I swapped out the impeller for the AquaClear 20, so the flow was a little bit lower, but I still had all the housing available, and I packed that with biomedia, and I kept the tank bare. I didn't have any macroalgae, I didn't have any substrate, and that just made it easier to vacuum and see when there were pieces of food or waste that got to be vacuumed up. And I probably did a mini water change just about every day because it happened naturally with all the vacuuming. But the population starts building. I remember when I got to over 100 something, I do have a short video of it because it was just so bizarre to see so many, and that's including all the little babies. It became impossible to keep that tank clean because I work a full-time job. So I'd come home at night, I'd vacuum it out. I'm like, this needs to be done at least twice a day. And I was trying to be creative and figuring out how can I rehome some of them. So Ray, I was really interested in hearing you talk about selling them. Do you sell them at like fish shows? How were you selling the seahorses?
Well, basically, it was through a local forum that we had. Excuse me. We had a local club here that was saltwater, and so some of the saltwater people got interested in the dwarfs, and there were more got interested in that than the reed eye that I was
see.
raising.
Interesting.
Wow.
And it just kind of evolved there. But then again, just thinking about now, when you're talking about this cleaning daily or every other day, me being lazy, that's why I come up with this little
Yeah.
Yeah.
microfilter to take the stuff out. And then when the next feeding come, I would turn it off and take the cartridge out, put
Oh,
another
yeah.
cartridge in, and clean the other one, and then reset the timer so that it wouldn't come on again until an hour and a half or so later. But it was basically because I was lazy,
Yeah.
and it bothered me doing this cleanup all the time.
So I got to.
Now,
Sorry, go ahead.
when I did every other day, or like what I'd settled down to, but on the days, if it was only 3 or 4 days interval that I did it, or the every other day, I did do the tank cleaning at that time. And again, the same as you, I didn't have any substrate in there. I stayed bare
Yeah.
bottom again because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
Well,
But then again, all my other species were all bare bottom too.
Yeah.
so a couple of questions, because I remember Lucy kept dwarfs too, and what she would do is, instead of doing these massive water changes, because like I can't imagine you're vacuuming all the time and then they're so tiny. Like
Yeah.
with fry, I've accidentally, oh, there goes a fry. I got to get
Yeah.
it back out of the dirty
Yeah.
water and put it.
Yeah.
And so,
Happens.
and so
I went for many rides through the siphon hose.
Yes.
well, what Lucy used to do is remove the dwarfs. She had 2 tanks, and she would just put them in the new tank. Then you don't have that problem. But obviously, that's still also a lot of work.
It is a lot.
My
of
other
work.
question was, you said it was bare, and it sounds like that's the way to go with dwarfs, obviously. But did you have like plastic hitches, or what else was in there?
I learned pretty quickly, the simpler the design of the plastic hitches, the better, because those colorful, flowery looking things, as nice as they look in the tank, those filled up with debris and waste pretty darn fast and were
Yeah.
impossible to keep clean. So I went with plastic sea fans, or
Yeah.
just creative hitching posts, things that were easy to take out and clean. I did want to comment though, with the filtration system that I had, it did create a current, and just even with larger species seahorses, we've learned that it's a myth that they need to have calm water. I used to have people comment, how do you keep your seahorses so active and swimming around all the time? And I think it's the current. They like swimming in the current. I have alternating current here, and the seahorses swim in the current. I think it's exercise for them. I think they just like it. So
I gotta say, I've said this before multiple times. I've got so many videos. I got bashed online because I have a video of my Erectus literally hitched to the cord that goes out of the tank and laying, and I had the power head or the wave maker covered with net so that the seahorse couldn't get injured. But he's laying on it with his head just in the flow. And he loves that. I also have videos of the seahorses literally like it's like a game. They go directly at the flow, and then they get pushed all the way backwards, and then they go directly at the flow, and then they jump, and it's like they love it.
It's like a game.
Yeah.
It is. And with the dwarfs, 2 things I just keep thinking of comments. I did not mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. But I remember Cheryl. Do you guys remember Cheryl with fry or with dwarfs? She would use just colorful zip ties. Those were her. I mean, like getting creative. Yeah. And I was going to say, Dan made that comment too. Like, again, he was commercial though. He was not just a hobbyist, but he was using tubs. And he would absolutely say flow, and he kept them in perpetual motion, and they would just come around like at the food and catch it as they went. I mean, it just totally agreeing with you.
They do learn to navigate it, but something different that from what Ray did also that I think, in my opinion, helped with the success, in addition to enriching the live brine, I let a wall of algae grow on the back wall, and that kind of helped control the nitrate levels and kept the water quality in check. But I used to I had a container of copepods with little copepod houses, and I had
Mhm.
2 of them. I would keep one house in the copepod mixture or culture, and then put one in the dwarf seahorse tank, and they would pick off of the copepod house, but a lot of the copepods would escape and they would bury themselves in the algae in the back wall. And so I have footage of them hanging on the back wall and they're scanning, looking for the copepods back there. So I think that's one of the things that helped, because that was a natural food item for them versus the live brine shrimp. Even if though it's enriched, it's still not their natural food, and copepods are more like what they would eat in the wild. So I think that was part of my success as well.
Oh, I love it. And the algae wall, that's literally like a an algae scrubber in the tank, right? I mean,
Right, it's
you were,
true.
yeah, you were
I
doing,
didn't even
that's
think of
really
it
a
that
cool
way.
idea.
Yeah, but that's true.
Yep. And so, okay, so
Getting back to that low flow thing, when I started back in 2002,
Yeah.
I was all upset because here I've got a bunch of uh, Hagen power heads in my seahorse tanks. Each one's 400 gallons per hour, and everybody's talking about this low flow thing.
Yes.
right.
Mhm. It's still
I'm
out
sitting
there.
here getting upset
Even in
because
fish stores,
they wasn't
knowledgeable
supposed to be
people
like
say,
that.
"Oh, you must have low flow in your tank." No, I don't.
No. Well, and another,
Well, eventually I told, I after a few years though, I got up to all my tanks had 20 times plus
Oh,
mhm.
wow.
flow.
Now what, you wouldn't say that for dwarfs though, would you? I mean,
No.
like,
Well, actually, for the dwarfs, all they had in there was a couple open-ended
airlines.
airline, rigid airline tubes, plus that little mini filter that I had in
Yeah.
there. And I didn't have any problem needing a high flow for the dwarfs because the food stayed in motion. It wasn't like when I broadcast feed into one of the big seahorse
Sure.
tanks, the food would settle out. So the more flow that I had, I could keep that all that food in suspension for a longer period of
Yeah.
time. And the trick was just to get each power head arranged so that the water flow, when it did let stuff come out of suspension, to get it into an area that was convenient for just siphoning out. It would gather all in one spot,
Hmm.
and so you had to move the flow around until you got it right where you wanted it.
Sure.
And it wasn't always easy, but it was worth the effort once you got it set
But
up.
your point is that with the dwarfs, because we're talking live
But the
foods,
dwarf,
yeah,
yeah,
you didn't. But I
yeah,
still like Teresa's idea of using the filtration, using beneficial,
yeah.
not beneficial bacteria. What am I trying to say?
The
Not chemical. Yes, bio. Yes,
yeah,
you know,
biological filtration. Yeah.
biological.
Yeah.
I never ever tested for nitrates in any seahorse tank in all the years, 21 years I was
Yeah.
Well,
there.
and I get that, Ray, but I just think that that's a smart thing because of the fact that with the dwarfs, even if you're doing massive water changes, you've got a lot of them in one spot. Then you have all the enriched brine shrimp. I feel like nobody's wrong here. Obviously, you were both successful. I just love the idea of the algae wall and the copepods. I just think that's so cool. I love that. And so you with the Artemia, and obviously you were using the copepods, which was an additional food, which had, more saltwater nutrient,
Right.
whatever, buildup. But what were you using to enrich them? Because, oh, by the way, for anybody who's watching, who's wondering, wait, what are they talking about? The reason that we keep saying that dwarf seahorses are like fry is because they're tiny,
Yeah.
right? And I'm going to try to get Teresa's footage and share it here in a little bit. But what I was going to say is they're tiny and they won't eat frozen foods, right?
Yeah. They
So
won't.
when you have dwarf seahorses, you've got to enrich Artemia and feed them, or come up with something creative like Teresa did and do mysids, or I'm sorry, copepods. Dan used to do mysids with them because they wouldn't eat them, right? So he was raising them all together. But my point being, they are very much like raising fry because they have to have those live foods and they're tiny and they never really get bigger. And then you add on the fact that they're constantly having their own little babies. So
yeah, they're very prolific, very prolific.
Yes.
Once they start reproducing, that's it. That's no turning back on them for sure.
So what was your enrichment process?
So what I did is I made a powder for myself using Huffa powder, spirulina powder, sea chem, marine flake with probiotics.
Nice.
I'm trying to think. I think there was one more thing that I had to. I can't remember. And I used to grind it up in a coffee grinder, and then I would add some salt water to it, and then I would put it through a couple of sieves. And I think the highest level would have been was it 250 or 200 micron, so that I made my own green water. And
Gotcha.
It wasn't live, but it was what I used after I hatched my brine. I would put them in a new vessel after separating them, and then I would add my green water and tinge the water with that. And I just kept it in the refrigerator until the bottle was empty, and then get all over again. So that was my process.
Did you say Huffa?
Yeah.
Did you say
Huffa
Huffa in there? So they sell Huffa powder?
Yeah, Brine Shrimp Direct sells
that.
a lot of those things.
Okay.
Brine Shrimp Direct sells Huffa powder. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And the reason again, I don't need to hang on, I'll let you talk, Ray, I promise. We're talking over. I don't need to over-explain, but I was rambling a minute ago. Got to finish the sentence. So basically, when you have, tiny dwarf seahorses or seahorse fry, and you want to feed Artemia because that's what everybody feeds their, their babies. The thing is, Artemia aren't saltwater, so they don't have the things that a saltwater creature eating them need, and that's why we enrich. All right, go ahead, Ray. What were you going to say?
They are saltwater.
They are saltwater, but I don't think they have a complete profile that's sufficient for.
Yeah.
Basically,
thank you for correcting me.
They're a little bit more towards the brackish side, except that they actually go through all the stages of it, because they as the water comes in and dilutes the salt in the lake, then the specific gravity goes down. But then as the season goes on, then the specific gravity goes up, and they stop producing live, and that's when they produce the cyst.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, I'm a basic, right? And I'm just like, it eats the bacteria, and it doesn't eat right. So thank you for correcting me and making it correct, you guys. I appreciate it. But yeah, basically, they need things that our dwarfs and fry need. They need things that they don't have, is what I meant to say. But did you have something else to say, Ray? Go ahead. I feel like you were trying to say something.
It's just
okay, sorry.
Goes and comes.
Okay, Theresa, were you trying to say something?
I don't know.
Okay, I know I get off on a tangent. Everybody's lost. I'm sorry. But so.
That's what it. If you Brine Shrimp Direct, when I was talking to a manager there one time, I used to use Algamac 3050. Well, before that, there was another number. I know Algamac 2000 or something, but it ended up being 3050. And basically what it is Schizochytrium algae. And when I was talking to one of the owners at Brine Shrimp Direct one time there, he was saying that they use that in their formulation of flake foods to enrich the flake foods when they're making it, so that if I wanted, then I could ask him to make me up an order, and he would have shipped it then along with the spirulina that I was buying at the time.
Wow.
So this is a long time ago. And I never
still reach out to Brine Shrimp Direct.
I kept on using the Algamac. But for other people, I don't know how small a package they'd be selling, but like I was buying this Algamac, I think they were in 800-gram bags, and I'd buy about 5 bags at a time, and then I'd use it for myself with the rearing, and then sell off to other people that I'd got into the hobby, and I actually sold it to a lot of people that were raising clownfish. This was a long time ago, but anyway, maybe if somebody's looking for a decent powdered enrichment, which is better than an emulsion, because emulsions go sour quite rapidly. So the powdered ones are great. And so if you contact Brine Shrimp Direct, it may be to your advantage, because they might sell off a portion of Schizochytrium algae, and excuse me, and you can use that with your spirulina or whatever else that you're making for feeding the
Enrichment.
Actinia
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
enriching them.
Yeah.
And it'd be easier, because where I was buying the Algamac from in California, they only sold in large amounts, so that the ordinary hobbyist couldn't afford to do it.
Right.
But
Gotcha. Sorry, my phone was ringing. No, but that's great advice.
if
Go
Brine
ahead.
Shrimp Direct will sell it off to an ordinary hobbyist, that would be great. I never
Right.
advertised, but then again, back when we were talking, it wasn't advertised then. He just offered it up when we got into a conversation.
Sure. Well, one thing too, just on the side, speak, because I keep thinking of things and then we get to talking and it gets lost. I wanted to say, you asked earlier, Theresa, asked Ray about like who he sold his dwarf seahorses to, and I eventually hope to have a site that allows people to do that, because you can't do it on Facebook anymore, and I don't foresee like fish stores taking dwarfs. Do they? Yeah, because they'll sell the Erectus.
Yeah, we have one place that opened up near here that I've seen them with baby Erectus and dwarves, and they do get bought up. I don't know if I had dwarves still, if they would have taken them or not, but you're right. Most places, they're not interested. It's not worth the trouble for them to hatch out the brine and feed them until they get sold.
Right, and actually that's funny, because that's one of the pieces of advice that we give to anybody buying new seahorses is if you're going to buy them from a fish store, watch them eat frozen food. Obviously that couldn't happen with dwarves because they have to have live, but that's one of the tricks is, make sure that they're actually eating frozen food for the bigger species. But so aside from, obviously, Theresa, you're talking about, you had this 10-gallon, you had dwarves that just kept multiplying, very simple, basic setup, but you had the filtration, the biomedia. And then what was your water change schedule? Like, obviously, you were doing mini water change almost every day because you were sucking out the,
I would say it ended up equating to a 5 to 10% daily just from the vacuuming that I would do. And I would do a larger change on the weekend. So it might have been, that 50% on the weekend, might have been less than that. And some of it had to do with my work schedule. If I had to work late, we got an abbreviated version that night of whatever, or, a busy weekend. But pretty much for the most part, the weekends were reserved for doing the more intense, go ahead and wipe down and get the algae off the sides and front and do thorough vacuuming and doing larger water changes. And then during the week, the regular work week, coming home and just minimally making sure the vacuuming got done and replacing that water. And as well as swapping over all of the brine shrimp in the next phase, like a production line.
Well, that was actually my next question, because I really want people to grasp this. I sit here and whine all the time that I want my seahorses to give me fry. Still haven't, by the way. I forgot to update y'all. No fry. But dwarves and fry, it's serious. Like, you have to. So, Theresa, I'll just ask you to describe. Did you have like an assembly line? Like, you've got your hatchery, then you talked about how you do your enrichment, but you had to have a vessel to enrich them. Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I streamlined it well enough where I could do it pretty quickly. So
Oh, good.
a lot of people say, oh, use decapsulated brine. Honestly, I got nothing but frustration whenever I would try to decapsulate brine, because you never know if it's just right. If you've overdone it, then you don't have that batch hatching for you. And now you're desperate because you need to start another batch and get it hatching right away. If you try to buy it, it's ridiculously expensive. And then the last time I did try to buy it, they did such a poor job on it. It was not even fully processed, and it was expensive. I was very frustrated. So I hatched out my own. I rinsed it very well under cold tap water. And what I would do is I would take the hatched brine shrimp, the newly hatched brine shrimp, and I would pour it into one of those hatching dishes. And I would spread it in the outer edges.
Yep.
Then in the center, they would accumulate in about
They
20
can.
minutes.
Mhm.
The majority of them would be there, and you could just use the little net, or you could use a baster. And I would say I kept having them go to the center for a good 24 hours afterwards. So I would just let that dish sit even after I got the majority of them out. But those that I was taking out, I was putting in another vessel, and that vessel is the vessel that I would use to enrich. So I would have one vessel for hatching brine. I would have at least one hatching dish, depending the last time I harvested and was separating out. But oftentimes I had at least two. And then I would have another vessel set up that was enriching. And I experimented. Sometimes I just continued to add newly hatched brine shrimp from the hatching dish to the vessel that I already had that had the enrichment, and wouldn't start all over from scratch. Sometimes I would start from scratch. It was interesting to see that some brine shrimp would get a little bit bigger, but the dwarves, even though they would eat the ones that were a little bit bigger, they really did prefer the tiniest versions. So a lot of times I would start all over because it just gave me a little bit more what's the word that I want? A sound sense, because once I would empty it out, I would clean it very well. So I would, use a little bit of dish soap, a little bit of very watered down bleach spray, and make sure it was cleaned really good, let it fully air dry. And I had multiples, not dozens and dozens, but a few of each. So I could let one sit and completely dry, and no bacteria was going to build up in it, because that's, if you're going to have the bacteria problems, it's going to come from the brine shrimp, because it's such a dirty, patchy thing. The whole hatching process is so filthy. But then even everything that you put in, for me with the enrichment, it was just another opportunity to bring more unwanted bacteria in the dwarf seahorse tank. So I did try.
No, you figured it out. I was going to say, the only thing, I love your process, and you did figure it out. One of the things that we as seahorse keepers have added since, when you kept the dwarfs, is like a period where you use peroxide, because that helps. But it's awesome that you recognize that hatchery and the enrichment is the key to, if bacteria gets there, you're done. You're done. So that's really cool that you came up with your own way to, make sure it was clean. And I love it.
So it's pretty much a routine. Just move things down the line every day I come home from work. But, to your point, when people used to ask me, I've never kept fish, can I keep seahorses? I've never kept seahorses and I really want them. I would tell them, try hatching out live brine shrimp every day for a month and see how you feel about it at the end. Don't even get any fish or do anything with the brine. Just hatch it out every day for a month. Clean the equipment and start all over again every single day for a month and see how you feel about it. So I never people that they were
in our side chat. Ray actually just said to me, mean old Ray. He said, "I guess you'll have to get dwarf seahorses to have fry, Kelly." Ray, but I really would like.
I've never seen anybody have dwarfs and not have fry.
That is one of the benefits of them. They're a lot of work. All right. We acknowledge that. What is the offset? Why would anybody want fry if there's so much work? If you have the time, if you're like me, I work full time. It was really hard to do that. If I were retired, maybe that would be something more reasonable, but just things to think about. Like it's really hard to even travel unless you have to teach somebody how to hatch your brine or set up a system that they can feed for you while you're gone. But anyway, it's nice that you don't have to invest in a huge tank, a huge skimmer.
True.
The 10-gallon tanks, they're always on sale. You can get them for a few dollars. And a lot of times when those summer sales are going on, you can get an inexpensive hang on the back filter for them or whatever, if you're using a sponge filter or whatever kind of filter, if anything that you're using. So in that way, it's exciting to be able to afford them. It's so much cheaper than other seahorses or other marine fish. And the thing that a lot of people want is they want the babies and they want to be able to raise them. And you don't have to remove the babies and put them in a separate tank. You can just keep feeding them the same food, and mom and dad and babies, they eat the same thing. And then within a few weeks, they're having babies of their own. So that's all nice, but you have to weigh the balance of your life. Is it in your lifestyle?
Mm-hmm.
And Dan
they're labor intensive, like the fry.
Labor intensive. So Dan used to say he never understood why people love dwarf seahorses so much. I mean, because people, like Ray was saying, when back then they were more interested in the dwarfs than the reed-eye, which is just crazy to me. But he used to say because they're so tiny that you gotta look for them. But I could see in your tank there's nothing else, so you're gonna see them, right?
Yeah, for sure. I will admit there are times, because my eyes aren't great, I would pull out a magnifying glass just to get a good look at their activities sometimes, or get the good look at the coloration of them sometimes, or when you can tell that a female is carrying eggs and being able to see the pinkish color coming through her body, or when a male just mated, you could see the pink belly. So it was kind of fun. But yeah, sometimes I had to use a magnifying glass to get a really
This isn't something that I know because I've never kept dwarfs. So the male's belly or the female turns a pinkish because they're
the abdomen area, when they get really swollen, how when the Erectus females, they're carrying eggs, they get really fat in the middle. It's the same for the dwarves, but because their skin and their pigment isn't as strong, their skin, to me, it seems thinner than like an Erectus. You can see the coloration. You can see pink coming through the skin. It's not super bright, but it's a coloration. And the same thing within a few hours after mating, if you look at a male's pouch, you can tell that it was within a certain number of hours because his pouch is pink. I might even have some footage that shows the females and males with that pinkish color coming through.
That is so cool. I love that. See, and my adult seahorses here have tricked me multiple times. I thought that he was pregnant, he wasn't. So it's good to have that.
But, well, for sure. When you saw the pink, you knew that babies were coming for sure in the male. Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
And after you started with the dwarves and you got a feel for how you were doing, and I know you said you would work with them and then take a break and then work with them again. I get all that. But what was my two questions are: how soon did they start having offspring, and how long was the longest period of time that you were successful with them?
I would say this last group was my best success ever. And this is when I first time ever used the tank, the algae on the back wall, the hang on the back filter loaded with biomedia. And I had a good 2-year running with them before clearly something was going on in the tank. And I think it was just overcrowded. So any natural pathogens that are in the tank that are normally safe for them, I think just overran the tank, and I couldn't get it to stop. I probably should have just separated them, but hindsight is 2020. But I feel like I learned so much with this last group, and I continued to learn even when I was having die-offs at the end and the last batch went on. There are things I would do completely differently, for sure.
Okay, and what would, well, tell us, I am still here, guys. I'm just dealing with kids. But what would you do differently? What, like, go on a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say they started having babies. Oh, it seemed like in the beginning they weren't real interested in breeding, and I don't know if it was just an adjustment to the aquarium, or who knows, maybe even the season. Even though I kept the lights on for at least 12 hours, they were still able to access sunlight. So maybe even the level of sunlight had some influence. But I want to say it was maybe close to 2 months before they first started having babies. But then once they did, they just were nonstop. And then the generations were having babies, and those generations were having babies. And so it was a good 2 years when all of a sudden I had that situation where something was clearly wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it. I researched what I could, looked up different studies, reached out to different people that I knew, breeders and whatnot. And I just couldn't stop it. And I really believe once my tank hit over that 100-something mark with all the seahorses, I probably at that time should have gone ahead and set up another tank or found a way to rehome a good portion of them, even if I donated them to my local zoo, which has dwarf seahorses on display, or we have in Chicago the Shed Aquarium. I'm a member there, maybe donating to them there. Again, these are all thoughts that are great to think now, but at the time I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to kick this. I'm going to kick this. I've been so successful so far. And I think you get to the point where you almost get arrogant about it. You think, well, you know what? I've been doing so well. I'll get this figured out. But I just wasn't able to in the end.
So what you, I mean, basically what I heard was what you would do differently is when it got to a certain number where it
Yes.
seemed crowded, you would split them up.
Yeah, I would definitely split them up. And it should have been a clue to me when it became impossible to keep the tank clean after even one really big vacuum every single night, where I probably was doing a 25% water change at one time just because I was vacuuming out so much at one time.
Yeah.
And then, the next morning it would just look just as bad as the night before I had just finished vacuuming it. So that probably contributed for sure. I
So
imagine it was the turning point.
So I guess our advice, and guys, I might try dwarfs. I'm not saying if I never get fry, I'm going to try dwarfs.
Try hatching brine for 30 days straight every day. See how you feel about it.
I have done it.
She's done that.
Okay.
I have done that for fry. The only thing is with them, the really cool thing, and Holly and I have talked about this before, the really cool thing with fry, not dwarfs, is that you get to watch them grow, right?
Yes.
They become
Grow
these
up
big,
and-
massive, awesome creatures. And with dwarfs, they just stay tiny, and it's still cool.
You get
There's
to
nothing
watch
wrong
them
with it.
grow the baby. It's really cool watching the babies grow, even from the first day
Yeah.
to the 5th day, and then going into the 2-week mark. And then when they start getting around that 8-week mark, they're not as big as the other adults in there yet, but they're already starting to get sexually mature and starting to
Wow.
demonstrate some flirting behaviors when they get around to the 8-week marks. So it's really neat when you can identify one. When you have a lot, it's hard to just pick out one and follow it. But if you have one
sure.
that's got a unique color and you can find it right away, it's really neat to watch it progress and then become a parent itself. So I know
I was gonna say, Holly, we would be in trouble because we name our seahorses and stuff, and we'd be like, "That's
these are named, but there's no way I was naming the dwarves because I don't even know if I could.
Dwarves, yeah, I'd be like, how do you tell them apart?
I couldn't even count them all because you start counting in one part of the tank, and by
And
the
they
time
move.
the other part, they've moved. And did I get that one already? He looks familiar.
Well, the way I used to count fry was as I moved them, from the tank that they were born into.
you mean Erectus, right?
Yeah.
The fry.
Because
Yeah,
you have to get them out of the tank. So I'd get them in little Dixie cups and and scoop them out. And I'd be okay. There's 5, write it on paper. And eventually you get to 100 and something, but
Yeah.
I can't imagine counting dwarf seahorses in a tank.
Well, and I bet how
I had a couple of times when I took a picture,
to count.
take a close-up picture of the tank, and then get the picture out. But I'll tell you, it's harder to see them in the picture.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how small are dwarf fry? Are they like?
They're actually bigger than Erectus fry, and they can reach on right away.
Yep.
They're one of the smallest species, not the smallest, but one of the smallest species in the world. But they have one of seahorses, but they're one of the largest fry in the world of seahorses.
Yeah. How many fry do they have? Because I can't imagine a little dwarf carrying a bunch of.
Yeah. Most of mine had anywhere from 6 to 12 at a time. Some people said they've had some that have had as many as 25, which sounds like a really lot. They'd really be quite stretched out. So I suppose it's possible. But for me, I would say a very common number was right around the 8 amount. But it's really cool. They push them out. They fall to the ground like a rolled up little piece of thread, and then they shake out, and then they can grasp with their tails right away. They're like a miniature version of their parents right away. Maybe their heads are a little bit bigger, but not as dramatically different as like with Erectus fry, who are basically all head and then just a little body
string.
Yeah. That is so cool. I mean, you guys, I love, Theresa, that also we're going to talk about your transition into the larger species in a minute.
Yeah.
But I love that you gave us so many reasons why dwarves are a good thing. You were clear that they are labor intensive and you have to be ready and maybe hatch the brine shrimp for a month before you try them.
I love about it.
They're so much cheaper in the sense that I guess it's where you spend your money, right? Because you can set up a 10-gallon tank, and we've learned over the years, Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've learned over the years that with dwarf seahorses, smaller is better. Whereas with Erectus, larger, tank size is better. Sure. But with the dwarves, you want a smaller tank because you're going to have to do these massive water changes or figure out something the way Theresa did to keep the tank clean. I love the wall of algae. Have you mentioned that? But anyways, I totally lost my train of thought. Totally just lost my train
of thought. There are some benefits to keeping dwarves over and the dwarves themselves, I mean, individual are a lot less expensive per seahorse. And so you tend to buy them in groups, and they are very social. So they do very well with groups, but also the smaller tank benefits the dwarves because it helps keep their food density very dense, because they can be kind of lazy.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Thank you for finishing my thought, because I lost it. But yeah, just and also
I see posting about people starting off with a 10-gallon and 2 pair dwarfs. I suggest to them get a 1.5 or 2.5 gallon, put them in that one. Because, you're going to waste so much
that is
food.
true. Yeah.
Well, and as Theresa mentioned, aren't they so very social? Like, you want a group of them. You don't want just 2.
Group. Yeah.
Right.
You want a group.
If I ever do it, guys, I'll do a 10-gallon with 6. We'll see what happens. But okay, so then, and any questions about dwarfs, we will answer, of course. But I like the way that Theresa had set up. And the other thing is, you said that something happened. You believe that it was because you had too many in the tank. But I'll also mention, dwarf seahorses only live like 2 to 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Not that long.
Well, in the wild,
the
studies show that typically they live 1 calendar year. It's very unusual for them to make it to a 2nd season, and unheard of in the wild that they ever make it to a 3rd season. So not just their age, I think it has to do with their ability to tolerate the cold and things like that. They just don't have the same strength level. But yeah, typically they only live 1 year. They actually live longer in home aquariums because they're not subject to the fluctuations in the temperature or predators or other things that cause their demise in nature.
See, but that's so interesting. Like, people are so against seahorses and tanks, but it sounds like we're keeping them alive longer. And,
The dwarf seahorses,
we,
for sure. If you keep them alive, yeah, they're living longer than they would in the wild, for sure.
that's awesome. So after whatever happened, you had too many in the tank and you lost them. What made you decide to try the larger species?
In one way, I mean, I've had the larger species before on and off through the years.
Okay.
And many years ago, the 300-gallon tank was bought for me after my father-in-law had passed on, and I used to keep cowfish. And I've actually written several articles about cowfish because at the time I was keeping them, there was very little known about them. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to write about them because I know more about them than anybody else I can figure out. So I had like 125-gallon, and after my father-in-law passed, he left some inheritance money. So we upgraded to the 300 because the cowfish can get pretty big. And so I originally had the tank for them. And then after my cowfish passed, we converted it to freshwater and kept getting fancy goldfish for a while. But once the seahorses were gone, I just can't shake the seahorse bug. Some people, it's just in our blood. And my husband is not a fan of me having seahorses because he thinks I spend way too much attention to the seahorses. It's the larger the tank, the less work it is, and the more stable.
Yes.
So I thought, you know what, I'm not going to go back to dwarfs. I'm still working full time, and so yes, it's a lot of work with the brine shrimp, and it was really devastating for me to lose that big batch that I had. So I thought, let me try with the large ones again. And I actually struggled because I tried keeping them in like a 37-gallon aquarium. I did not have a sump. I can't remember. Maybe it was a canister filter. I don't know. Or maybe it was a canister filter. I just did not have luck. I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And I know, Kelly, you really advocate for a sump, and you're right. There's nothing that can compare with the ability to hold that much biological media with a sump. Otherwise, use lots and lots of hang on the back filters to come even close to that. But I know that this tank is very, very stable. So maybe a couple of months after the dwarves, I set this back up, let it run for a few months at salt water, slowly added macroalgae and let that start to grow, and then just started adding, amphipods, copepods. There's probably isopods in there too, just whatever's coming on the macroalgae. I've got some ghost shrimp in there, a couple peppermint shrimp. And then when I was ready, I ordered them again, and they're doing extremely, extremely well. And now that I have them in there, I told my husband many times, no, you don't need a 300-gallon aquarium for seahorses. But now that they're in there and I see how they love swimming back and forth, I'm like,
they love a lot of space.
Reimagine them being in a smaller tank. How could I have tried to keep them in a smaller tank before? It means so small, 1/10 the size practically. So it's nice. They have plenty of places to hide. They've got current to swim in if they want. There's lots of macroalgae, which is nice because then all of the natural food items are in there. And so they graze all day long. And really my frozen shrimp for them is just a supplement. I feed them a dose in the morning and then a dose at night when I come home from work. And that's enough for them to get more protein in, but they're pretty much eating all day long with the other things that are in the tank already. And so I actually have microalgae in there now too, and I don't really care that much about it. I mean, I'm not worried about it looking so beautiful. I'm more worried about having a nice home for the seahorses with a nice, good food supply for them. So,
yes, I have a couple of questions. So first of all, tell us about the setup of the tank. So in this tank, obviously 300 gallons, you've got a lot of options, but do you have a sump? What's the equipment? Tell us about the tank.
Yeah, so I have a sump. It's actually an old wet dry trickle filter, and I just am using it like a regular sump. So I took out the drip a crate and all of that so I can maximize the amount of water that the tank would hold at the bottom. And I'm running it as just a regular sump, and I have what do I have in there? Different biomedia in there. There's some BioPure. There's some Seachem Matrix in there. I'm running that. I'm trying to remember the return pump. I think it might have like 600 or 800 gallons per hour on the return, but I also have power heads or wave makers, whatever you want to call them, one on each side of the tank, and they run at about 1,200 gallons per hour. But I have them running on from a control box, and they alternate every 30 minutes. And I kind of like that because then there's one part of the tank that's always calmer if the seahorses want the calmness, and then one part where the current is, and they get to know the patterns. And if they want to swim, go into the current. It also really helps with the tidiness of the tank, because I've found I did just have 2 lesser power heads blowing at the same time, so it wasn't too strong. But you always have little corners that never get blown into unless you had a little tiny one in every little corner. But I find if you let the power head blow from the one side, it stirs up things from that end while things settle on the other end. And then when it flips the 30 minutes later, it's always constantly stirring things up. And I think it's
I love it.
The different foods and things too. So like the amphipods and things that are growing in the microalgae as well as the macroalgae, they flip back and forth, but it reveals to the seahorses or covers up from the seahorses, and they get a chance to hide too. So it's
I love that.
yeah.
And I was going to ask too. One of the things we've talked about a lot on this channel is natural live foods like that. And like my seahorses, copepods, they don't even see them, won't
Mine
touch
eat
them, nothing like that.
They eat the bigger copepods.
See?
I'm surprised. They snack on them. But I bought, I can't remember what the big ones are. The Tisbees? Are those the really big ones? I can't remember.
The Tigger or whatever.
Tigger pod.
Go on.
I just bought like the variety. Some are better at cleaning in the little nooks and crannies of the buildup. Some are better at, keeping microalgae down and stuff. But I was surprised. I mean, maybe it might even be isopods, because they seem pretty big for copepods, but they're definitely not amphipods or baby amphipods in there. So maybe just the macroalgae that I've put in there came in with isopods too, which are sort of like a intermediate size between the copepods and the amphipods. But they're snacking all the time. I used to be worried,
I love it.
Well, that they weren't getting enough food, because I was only feeding them before work and then after work when I was home. And then on the weekends, I might give them an extra supplemental feeding. But sometimes, you know how you just sit and watch your tank. They'll just be sitting there, and all of a sudden they'll just take a little snick at, something on a little piece of microalgae or in some of the macroalgae there. I'm like, oh, well, there's stuff in there and they're finding it. And
yeah, there's something.
They're a good weight, and the females are fat because they all look like they're carrying eggs, because when I got them, they weren't gender ID'd yet. They were juveniles.
Oh,
so,
okay.
It worked out with a nice ratio in the end, 2 males and 4 females. I'm real happy about that. So I think that's a good amount.
And Ray always says, he points out, even in my videos when I've been slacking, or back in the day when, my mom was sick, and I wasn't taking care of the seahorses, he can spot right away that a seahorse isn't getting enough food because they become concave, right?
They do.
Yeah. And if you've got fat seahorses and you're feeding twice a day, but you have all those live foods, they're eating it. It's just interesting to me because I don't know why. I've tried all sorts of different live foods, even amphipods. And my seahorses look at them like, what's that? And Holly, haven't you had the same experience? Or
yeah, I did. And I think it might be just what they're used to, because when they're younger, they're more open.
She
to
started when
They're
they were
very
young.
curious when they're young, right?
When they're
That's why they're willing to-
juveniles, yeah, they're interested in
Yeah.
everything. And then
Yeah.
as they get older, they get used to what they're used to.
That makes sense.
So
And
I
it's-
think mine eventually got used to just
Frozen.
having frozen foods because that's
Yeah.
what I was feeding them.
Yeah. So when I
Right.
first got them, they were not eating the frozen, and it was just a transition time, even though supposedly they're captive bred and they were already weaned onto frozen. But I did have other things in the tank and they were eating them. And then just for my own peace of mind, my local fish store sells live adult brine shrimp. So I was adding some spirulina to that and then adding that to the tank just so I could see them eat. It just made me feel better. And then, but I still kept trying, make sure I had enough current to get the frozen to move around because that movement seems to be a big attraction for them to intensify eating. And then once they started, it doesn't even matter if it's moving or not. They see it, they go after it now.
But that's so cool, and I love that story because we've had a lot of people that get seahorses that are supposedly captive bred, and then they won't eat the frozen. So I love that you have described how to set up and handle that, and that they did. So what do you think made them start going after the frozen? Just that you kept it in suspension, and then they figured out it was food?
Yeah, I played around with the current a lot in the beginning, and I just made sure that it was suspended, but not so strong that they couldn't catch it because they were little, and it was hard for them to catch it if it was just blowing by. So just enough to lift it up, and then they just started eyeing it and getting curious after a little bit, and all of a sudden they started taking snips, and once they had the epiphany, aha, this is food. I didn't have to worry about it anymore. And then, they learn from each other too, because once one starts eating, the others come over. What are you doing? What do you got?
What'd you get? Yeah. What did you get?
What's that treat? Right.
I have a puzzle that nobody solved.
Okay, go ahead.
When raising the fry, when you're transitioning them to frozen food, I used to take the potato peeler and peel off the mysis shrimp.
Yeah.
I started with a razor blade first, but then I found the potato peeler made it easier, and eventually got them eating these pieces of mysis to transition them onto full-size pieces. And then once they got onto the full-size pieces, you can't get them to eat partial pieces.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's kind of weird. I've been experimenting with different sizes with them, and mine do eat the little pieces. And
mine do too.
They like the Piscean energetics is not their favorite. I don't know if it's just too big or weird looking for them. They seem to like the Hikari brand, and they don't mind the little pieces of it for some reason. But Ray, I used to do the same thing, but I used to take a sharp knife and chop up as fine and tiny as I could. And I have raised Erectus before to adults that were breeding also, but that was a long time ago, and that was before I started working on my doctorate. And once the last of my seahorses went, I had to take a break because there's no way I could get my doctorate and to raise horses too.
Sure.
A knife would have been too slow for me though.
I used a potato peeler.
I fry these.
I like the potato peeler idea. That's a good idea.
It worked great. I think I got the idea from Ray and some other.
I'm going to keep that in mind because I may be having to do that pretty soon.
It's
I already
the easiest way.
Fry tank set up because I just know from experience the last thing you want to happen is to wake up one morning and, oh my goodness, there's seahorse fry and I don't have a tank set up. So it is set up. It's been running a couple months already. So I'm ready to go. And I like your idea, Holly, of using a cup and just scooping and just grabbing as many as I can because I'm not going to be able to raise them all anyway. And I don't want to feel like I need to capture 1,000 babies and put them all in this tank. Just, get a good amount and then just see what I can raise from there. So, but you will be.
So what is your fry tank entail?
I
You said
tried to
instead of
mimic
been
something
running.
really similar to the dwarf tank, but instead of the 10 gallons, I have a 15-gallon tall. And I have this, I'm using the AquaClear 70, but I'm using the original impeller on there. Because I remember Dan Underwood talking one time about keeping fry, and this is when he and Abby were still experimenting, and they had a batch that just wasn't doing well, and they fully expected it to die, and they just decided to put on a really high flow, and they were just
Yep.
shocked the next morning that they were doing so well. And that has always stayed with me. So my husband even said, leave the original impeller in there and they'll figure it out. So that's what I'm going to do. We'll see what happens. So it's all
But
one
I
big.
mean, so you said it's been running a few months. Like, what did you do as far as like why is it running a few months? Like, are you cycling? Are you what's the plan with it?
So what I did is I took some media, biomedia from the main tank, and I added
Gotcha.
it to more media to the housing of the hang on the back filter to jumpstart it.
Yep.
There was so much flirting going on a couple months ago that I felt babies were imminent, and there might have actually been a pregnancy, and I think one of them might have pushed out eggs, which happens sometimes. You see fertilized
Yep.
eggs for whatever reason. It wasn't a good pregnancy. Maybe the water just isn't quite right for them, whatever. But if this guy, anyway, I thought a couple months ago they were coming, and I thought, I know better than to not have a tank ready to go. So even if the
Right.
babies aren't coming, it's not going to hurt anything to have the tank ready for them. So it's
Absolutely.
ready.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And I did want to ask before we jump into any other questions. You've mentioned that you have footage. You've mentioned that you have articles. Tell us a little bit, just really quickly, about you,
Okay.
about your doctorate, and where people can find these articles and videos. Where should they look for you?
Oh, that's so kind of you. Believe it or not, my doctorate is actually in educational leadership. I'm an elementary school
Oh,
principal. So it has
love
nothing
it.
to do with biology or science, but I've always been interested in science. So I don't know if you knew Don Dewey, but he used to be the owner of FAMA, Freshwater and Marine Aquarium magazine. And so he was the first person to take one of my cowfish articles and do something with it. Actually, I think I co-wrote a seahorse article with someone. This was back in the early days of seahorse keeping. And then I started writing about the cowfish. And like I said, nobody else really knew that much about them at the time. So I was like the person with that. And so I eventually became a contributing editor to that magazine. And I used to write about other fish that I would keep. And I can't remember.
And what did you say the name of the magazine was? I'm sorry.
It was Freshwater and Marine Aquarium, FAMA,
Okay.
FAMA. And I also had a couple things, I think, in TFH, Tropical Fish Hobbyist. And then I had somebody reach out to me from Poland and had me write articles for them that they translated
Wow.
Polish, which was amazing. That was totally unsolicited on my end. I came out of the blue.
Huh.
I've probably worked with fish tanks for over 50 years. I've had fish tanks since I was a little girl, but probably saltwater more in the last 30 years. And so just different rounds with seahorses, dwarf seahorses, cowfish. And I don't have a special Facebook page or anything set up. I started doing YouTube videos just kind of as an experiment. The first time I had seahorses back in the day when Dan used to sell them, my first big seahorses were from him, and I did pretty well. I was able to raise a couple of babies with that batch with a 30-gallon aquarium. I can't believe it, and I had substrate and everything. I don't know how I did so well, to be honest, and over time, I had a couple of videos from back then. And then when I was ready to try to get back into dwarf seahorses this most recent time, I thought, what, let me just put stuff on YouTube and see what happens. Because I had no idea. I'm going to do it sort of like not a documentary, but sort of like a just a little journey, a video journey of how things go, and just ask people for
what's the name of your
my
YouTube channel?
my username is Cowfish Pro. So that's
Okay, all right.
YouTube channel is. Yeah.
Go
And
on. I was just looking for you.
No, yeah. So in my YouTube channel, I have a ton of playlists regarding dwarf videos. And I have some really old videos too from seahorses that I kept from many years ago. And I've been posting recent things about this tank. I did a series as I was setting up the 300-gallon tank. Okay, now it's converted to salt water. All right, now we have to let it cycle. All right, now I'm going to add macroalgae. Now I'm doing this, now I'm doing it. Now I have the seahorses. So just doing little updates like that. But I was really surprised, Kelly, when I first started putting things out. Couple people here and there were watching videos, and I thought, oh, that's nice. But then when people started viewing and I started getting comments and requests and questions, I'm like, oh, wow. And then I kind of expanded and thought, you know what, this is my channel. I'm just going to put up there stuff that I want to put up. So I have things about my garden, I have things about nature. People, they comment on it and it gets views. I'm like,
they love it. Yeah.
Why are people interested in this stuff? And I'm just putting up stuff that I'm interested in. So apparently there are other people. So now this is kind of sad. I've got a series going. I had to say goodbye to my dog of nearly 14 years this past July. So each week I've been putting out a series for each year of his life. And I've got videos and photos, and I just talk about what's going on in the photos. I got a couple more videos to do, but people have been so kind and empathetic, which I think is wonderful, because we know the last few years, sometimes people haven't been very nice to each other, and it's really nice to can still be human beings, and we have things that connect us and bond us. So just really anything.
And I love it. And I want to make sure that I follow and that I let our viewers follow. And you said it's in YouTube, it's Cowfish Pro?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So at Cowfish Pro will pull up my username. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I'm trying
so
to
it will have a picture of a cowfish, and then it will have little seahorse in the background if you found the right one.
I think I found you.
Yeah.
Let's make sure real quick. Is this the correct? Hang on. Here we go. Going over to.
Oh, I'm really. It's me.
All right. Yeah. So everybody go and subscribe. I'm already subscribed, it looks like.
Oh, cool.
I sure am.
Yeah.
So definitely go check that out. And yeah, I see the mourning the loss of the pet.
Yeah, that was
Dwarf Seahorses update.
Yeah.
Hatching brine shrimp. Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
This is really amazing.
Yeah, I go through my process that I use for preparing the enrichment, how I do the enrichment. And these are all videos. People would send me questions. Well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I go, that's a great question. Yep. Let me tell you, here's how I do it, but let me do a video on it and then just put it up there. So I got a couple other projects because people have asked me questions. I'm like, all right, thanks for asking about it. I'm really interested in the shed aquarium. I have a picture of me and my brother when we went there as little kids. So I did a little documentary on shed aquarium because we're high-level members there. So I'm really interested in aquaria. I've always been interested in fish, but just an animal and nature lover for sure. So
I love this. I'm like, I want to watch the videos now, but I won't. I won't.
Well, and to add to it, Kelly, my husband for last birthday, Christmas, bought me a really nice drone. So we've been taking little trips, and I've been getting some cool drone footage, and I've been learning history about some really neat places because then I'm making videos. And here is something that is unbelievable. We went to in an area called Joliet here, it's like a museum now, but it's an old ironworks, and all that's left is some of the old cogs and decayed buildings and things, but it really made a beautiful aerial view with my drone. So while we were there, I'm getting ready to fly my drone, and this young lady comes up to me and my husband. She says, could I ask for your help? I'm working on a school project, and you need to and that I'm a ghost and I'm trying to get you, but you don't see me. And her boyfriend or somebody's doing the camera shot. And of course, I'm happy to help a student. So we did it. So then we did it for her. I do the drone footage. I put my video out. I get a message from her on YouTube. Oh, that drone footage turned out so nice. I'm the person who did the recording with
Oh,
Ironworks. I got a good grade on my assignment. Thank you for helping me out. I mean, it's such a small world that she found me.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Well,
it was so fun.
No, absolutely. Zen Ginger just put up the channel too. Absolutely, go check it out. I'm going to, because listen, I know what it takes making these videos too. Like, I haven't made one in years. I need to. I have so many things I want to share, but the editing and the getting the video together. So I think it's so cool that you've done this, especially like for Dwarf Seahorse Keepers. And I did have one question though. What is this? Let me find it again. Something about transferring seahorses to fresh water. Tell us about that.
Whoa.
What's that about?
That is based many years ago when I was researching seahorses. I was part of a seahorse forum when email was like a brand new thing. And somebody there had an article that was in French about a freshwater seahorse. And he had asked for somebody to translate it. And I waited to see if anybody answered. Well, French was my minor in college. And I said, did you ever get anybody to respond? And he said, no. And I go, well, let me take a shot at it. So I got a copy of the article. And then I did the translation for him. And he sent me a little nominal thank you gift, which was nice. He didn't have to do that. It was my pleasure to do it. But I still had a copy of the original article and the translation. And I thought, you know what? I hear a lot of people don't realize seahorses are saltwater creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I would talk about two aspects of that. One, there was an article. This was based on a discovery in the Mekong River in the early 40s, I want to say it was. And that's what started the rumors. In the 50s and 60s, it perpetuated. Mildred Bellamy talked about it in her old books, that there was this mythical freshwater seahorse, but there was never, they found these carcasses that were in the Mekong River, and they believed it was a male, female, the skeletons. They never were ever able to find any more after that. So,
they probably died because they went into fresh water. But go ahead.
Well, it could be, but I believe that waterway has shifted from its salt level. So it might have been brackish at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And it led me to talking about people wanting to convert seahorses to freshwater, because we know freshwater is so much easier than keeping salt water. You don't really mess around with the water parameters and adding salt and measuring all of that. And so Mildred Bellamy talked about, I don't know that it was a scientist, but somebody who experimented with different species of seahorses. And he would slowly drop the salinity down little by little, and he would get down to 1.011, and they would survive. But the moment they dropped below that, they would die consistently. So I just got curious about it, because I just thought it was so interesting talking about this discovery and how it perpetuated these rumors that were rampant in the 50s and 60s. I had not seen anything much after the 50s and 60s about that, but there was a lot of discussion about it, but it never did turn into anything. And then the experiments that were done, and I think people thought maybe you could convert them because, with brackish fish, you can slowly acclimate them to full fresh or full salt. So I think people hoped they could do that with seahorses too. And there are pipefish that are freshwater. So maybe that's another reason too that people thought. relatives that was. So I thought, you know what, that was an interesting topic. Sometimes I just like to put out fun facts too. I know you have fun facts on your site too.
I love it. I can't wait to explore your site, seriously. And
Oh,
then
gosh.
Ginger said, there are unfortunately a lot of fish that are getting sold as freshwater that are actually brackish and can stand fresh for a small time, but it will drastically reduce their lifespan,
Yeah.
but money. Right.
Yeah, they'll survive a bit, but will they thrive? That's a different question.
Yeah.
Well, and that's an interesting thing that we have discussed endlessly about the fact that a lot of people, like Holly, what do you keep your seahorse tank at, salinity wise?
Oh, like usually it's about 1.021.
Yeah. And Ray, do you remember what you used to keep your tanks at?
Different years, different rates. Most, excuse me, most of the time 2.6, but in the last few years I was down 2.4. Pardon me. My very early years when I didn't know a lot, around 2003, 2004, I had a tank with problems, and I took the specific gravity down to 9. And the reason I trusted the 9 was because my tangs were prone to ick all the time. And there wasn't any ick treatment I found that could solve the problem. So I eventually, over the years, found that if I got them down to 9, and you can't go lower than 9, but get them down to 9 and leave them there for 4, 5, 6 weeks, then I never had a problem with ick after that.
Yeah.
Really?
And,
You broke the cycle. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but that meant that I couldn't add anything to the tank after that, because then the ick cycle would start all over again.
Right.
Did you ever have a UV sterilizer?
Pardon me?
Did you ever have a UV sterilizer?
No, mainly because UV sterilizer for saltwater tanks especially don't work on the pathogens that seahorses are affected by. The pathogens that affect seahorses are all benthic, not pelagic. And stay on the surfaces. They never go through the UV. If you have other inhabitants of the tank that can benefit from limiting the pelagic pathogens, then fine. That's good there. And I believe Dan believed in using it for fry tanks. But I never ever did use it for fry tanks. I've got a UV that I have used.
So wait. Why did Dan believe in using it for fry tanks?
I don't remember now. Like Dan and I started years ago. We started at the same time.
I know.
But he ended up making a business of it. But I already had a business, so there was no way I was getting it. But
no, I need to get him back in here to answer some questions. But go on. Sorry.
He's not even posting on his Facebook anymore.
Oh,
I know. Yeah, health stuff. But go on.
But anyway, so at this time, I didn't know much about seahorses. I'd only been into them a year or so, and so I figured, well, maybe it's ick. Well, it wasn't, but I put the seahorses down and I kept them for, I don't remember now for sure, 6 or 8 weeks at 9. And it was okay at that. And then the big thing is to remember to bring it up slowly. You can drop the specific gravity fairly fast, but you must do it very slowly on increase. And but when I brought it back up again, I still had the problems. And I found out later that it was a bacterial problem, but I didn't know that back then.
Sure.
And I lost one of them before I found out that I could treat them with I can't remember the treatment I was using at the time.
Like triple sulfa,
Well,
Furon 2.
this is just a name brand one. They had freshwater and marine versions of it.
Okay.
And damn, this is a problem with cognitive impairment. You can't get words
I
out.
get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get
Sit
it.
here and I can see the package sitting on the shelf, and I can't.
Yeah.
You can envision it, right?
I envy
Well,
you because you started into seahorses much earlier. Plus, you've got a 300-gallon tank. I tried to get a
Yeah.
180 down in the basement, and I couldn't get it down there. So I had to get 290s and put the 290s there on top of the stand.
My husband built a closet on the floor underneath. It acts as an extra brace to hold the weight.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go through the floor.
That's
Well,
one of the first things my husband did. And I only have a 75-gallon is my biggest, but my husband still, he went under the house to make sure that our floor and everything could support it because he's a carpenter and he's like, you put that much weight, on some floors, they can't take it. So we had to go make sure.
Yeah.
Ray, Zen Ginger said, is it nitrofurazone, maybe?
No.
No.
It's some.
Well,
It's something you never even see advertised anymore.
An older one, yeah.
I don't know why
yeah.
it got sort of.
And I was gonna say, we can't even get the newer ones anymore. I mean, it's a crapshoot. But
Yeah,
I did. And
This one actually had gram negative and gram positive versions. It
Oh,
wasn't.
Canison? Was it Canison?
No.
That had gram positive, gram
Oh.
negative.
It was even before I'd even heard of Canison.
Okay, then you got
okay, so
I used to use
that's
it
way back.
yeah.
many decades ago with my saltwater tanks, and when I had so many saltwater fish, I used to have about 1,000 gallons of tanks in the basement, and
Yeah.
mainly it was because of my love for tangs and butterfly. And the butterflies are okay. I could put a lot of them in a tank together, but I couldn't put a lot of tangs in a tank together. And so to get all the different tangs that I wanted, I had to have different tanks.
Yeah.
It was a good excuse at the time anyway, when my wife was still alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can relate to the spouse's opinions of things on the matter.
Right.
I lost her 13 years ago, and was thinking of when you were just talking about losing your dog. I lost mine last year,
I'm sorry.
if I hadn't had him after the wife passed, I wouldn't be here now.
I understand.
Yeah.
So now I've got 2 rescues.
Good for
An
you.
8 and a 9-year-old to come out of backyard breeding operations. But it's not the same as having one from puppy stage on. But when you're in your 80s, you don't want to take on something knowing that it's going to have to be rehomed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
It may happen.
Theresa, I want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It may happen anyway because they're 8 and 9 years old, and I have no way to know how long I'm going to live. But I'm betting that I'm going to survive at least to see the end of their lives. Well, I can't. So
we all hope.
I'll make it longer than she will. But the other one, I'm hoping I survive longer than they are, because it just tears me up. If I know I'm going and I have these dogs here, it's going to tear me up knowing that they have to be rehomed again.
I understand what you're saying. Yep, I can definitely.
Well, that's why you're just going to keep living, Ray. That's the bottom line. You're just going to keep living. Theresa, I know I asked you earlier, like, about the 300-gallon, but he mentioned skimmer, and it just hit my head. Like, what do you have a skimmer on the tank, and what is it rated and all that?
I honestly don't know what it's rated. I just have, it's one of those, this tank it's so old now, and it was custom made at the time. And then the sump, it has one of those built-in tubes with the collection cup for the protein skimmer. And I just use a I don't even know. I have a pump in there. Maybe it's 800 gallons per hour, and just let that bubble in there and skim out. So it's not like any of these new fancy rated skimmers. It's very simple. It's just the tube with the cup that sits on top, and it's got the aerated water going up into it with whatever pump I have. So simple.
Ray's smiling. Ray's smiling because he always makes it. He made his own skimmers, so simple sometimes is better.
Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is very simple. Not a lot of pieces to it. It's real easy to clean. Dump it, wipe it out every night, and we're good to go.
I can't say that about mine because mine were about 6 foot tall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Plus
That reminds me.
on top.
When I would go on the behind the scenes at the Shedd Aquarium, their skimmers are from ceiling to floor, and
Yeah.
what is their diameter? Probably 6 feet across.
Yeah.
Yep. No joke. No joke. I did want to ask Theresa also, like, about the macro algae that you chose for the tank.
Mhm.
Are there specific species? What was your game plan? What did you do?
I mainly wanted things that were going to be fast growing so that
Okay.
it would beautify the tank, give the seahorses places to hide, give the live foods in there places to reside. So most of what I have in there is some type of, everybody says it's different. I'm going to say Calipra. So
Yeah.
I've heard of Callirpa. I've heard of Calipra. So I have right now some palm tree Calipra in there. It's very sturdy. Seahorses like to grip the branches of it with their tail. It's a nice size. I just like the looks of it. I also have Prolifera in there due to its name. It does spread, and it kind of reminds me, not exactly like turtle grass, but like the seagrass beds that you might find seahorses in. And so just creating that kind of environment. I think I might have a little grape algae in there too. I thought it had died off, but that's the other thing about Calipra. It will come back, and I think it's coming back. So I have some of that. I did have some Cato or Chato. I've heard that pronounced different ways too. And I used to have it with the cowfish, and it grew prolifically, but now it's just like melting away, and I'm not sure what the difference is. Maybe my life is different than back then, so I don't know. There might be traces of that in there, but I also have some decorative red too, just to create pop, and they're also good for like amphipods and copepods to reside. I'm trying to remember. Well, it starts with a G. Graciela.
Gracilaria.
Yeah,
Gracilaria. Yeah.
So a couple different species of clumps in there too, just to add a little bit of color pop, but just a different place for those live creatures to reside too.
I love it. I mean, we can see the background, but the glare
The
kind
light,
of makes us not
yeah.
be able to see it perfect. No, and you're fine. I'm just saying I can't wait to like go watch your videos and see the tank a little bit more clearly, because it looks really. I mean that's like seahorse heaven. I mean, man, everything they could want.
Yeah, people
So
tease
cool.
me that I can swim in there with them because it's so big.
And how many are in there? 6?
Just 6, but see, I've known from keeping seahorses before, once you start raising babies, because you don't want to give them all away, and then those babies start having babies, and 6 are going to turn into however many. So I really stayed. I started with 4, and then I thought, oh, they're on sale, I'm going to get 2 more, and then I did get 2 more. And then, no, I held fast and firm on the 6. And now they're all mature adults. They're beautiful. I have a recent video showing the beautiful yellowish color of 3 of the females that I just put out. I think it was last week. But they're just doing so well. If a seahorse can be happy, I would say they're happy. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you can give an attribute like happiness to a fish, but they're the closest they're going to get.
So what's the name of? Is it on YouTube? The video?
Yes, it is on YouTube. It's what did I call it? Something like let me see, seahorse colors. Let me see. Like I've got my phone here.
Yeah, let's look, because I don't want to show her videos because you need to go watch them, right? We don't want to show them
Yeah.
here. But really cool. And I want to make sure that everybody can go watch what she's talking about.
Yeah, so when I look at my shorts, I think I put it out last week. What's it called?
It's a short.
Stunning, yeah, it's a short. Stunning Seahorse Colors.
Okay.
And it's
All
3
right,
of my
let's see.
females.
All right.
They're-
So I'm telling people to go to your channel and watch. Can we show that one though?
Sure,
quick?
go ahead. It's short.
Okay.
It's
All right. Let's watch her short real quick. Hang
it's-
on.
always so fun listening to your own voice, isn't it, Kelly?
Oh yeah, I know.
It is.
I get it. No worries though. Here we go. All right.
Yeah, that's the
Can
one.
you guys see it?
Aw.
Isn't she beautiful?
Yeah, look at her.
She just snapped something.
Yeah, she's snicking something off that plant. She
Mm-hmm.
found something.
Mm-hmm. And then the one girl at the end, she is a healthy eater, and she's really, really big. That's the one. She's really big. She's going to turn in a minute, and you're going to see her beautiful color.
With macro in that tank, it's almost a certain bet that you have mysid shrimp.
You think so?
Oh, you know what? Maybe.
I don't know any marine tank that has either live rock or plant life or corals that don't populate with mysid shrimp.
Oh, that's good to know. I that's why I was guessing it had isopods, because it's hard to get plants
Okay,
and things.
one way you can find out, if you can get yourself a red light source,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple hours after lights out,
Yeah.
make sure there's no lights on, go down with that red light source. It has to
Mhm.
be really red, and look around in the tank. They don't see the red light. Okay, and
Oh.
if you have mysids, and depending on the layout of your tank and the decor and so on, they quite often will pick a certain area and they'll be cavorting all together around in that one area.
Okay.
And so when I was cultivating the mysids, I
Yeah.
used to set in the daytime. I'd put a siphon hose in the area that I knew that they would gather at nighttime, and I'd leave it sitting there, or I'd prime it and put a cap on the end, and then I'd go down a few hours after lights out, and then turn this red light on and see them there. And I've got this tube sitting there, and they're cavorting around it. Pull the cap off the end and suck up some mysids, and then I use them for the broodstock for the culturing.
Wow. You have a lot of great experience, right?
Mhm.
You really do.
Oh. Well, I have different experiences in some because I obsessed in certain areas of my hobbies, and
Okay.
like I used to sell brine shrimp to the stores. I grew them in 26-gallon Rubbermaid containers.
Oh, wow.
So,
I
but
commend
everybody,
Yeah, we've seen those.
I used to culture the amphipods too.
I commend you.
The amphipods, in a way, it was a little bit less labor intensive than the mysids.
Uh-huh.
I've just put trays of rock rubble and put the amphipods in there, and the predation would be minimal because the smaller ones could hide in smaller crevices that the bigger ones couldn't get in. Now,
Mm-hmm.
with the mysids, though, I had I guess you would call it a breed tank, a 20-gallon with the adults that would be in it, and had a special setup so that it would siphon off the naplee when they were born. So they go to the bottom, and so the adults can stay away from the flow. So
Right.
one half of the tank has got this tube going down to it, and down at the bottom, the adults could stay away from that flow. But when the newborns dropped, they don't have any ability to swim away from it at first. And so they would get caught up in the flow, go up into the other side and get
Mhm.
a collecting chamber. And then you take them out. But the biggest problem with it is because of their predatory factors, if one's just a little bit bigger than another, the smaller one's gone. So you had to keep, I set up 10 10-gallon tanks. And you would have to keep.
Right? He's going deep here. Wow.
He's making the dwarf sound easy now, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I know. Talk
Yeah.
about labor intensive, right?
As they got to similar size, as they started growing, I could put a couple of weeks together, and then eventually I could put all the adults in together because they're all adult size. They're not going to feed on younger ones then. So it was a learning experience, and I did it for a few years, but again, it was a labor intensive thing.
Yes.
And
Sure.
I dropped it off because I was selling them for $1 a piece at the time, and that was back in the 90s.
Mm.
And there weren't enough people willing to pay that for the mysids. Now,
Right.
mind you, they were selling cherry shrimp and other things at the pet stores for similar prices, but for some reason, the saltwater mysids, people were reluctant to pay that for.
Bonnie says you're so cool, Ray.
Yeah.
I mean, listen.
That doesn't
Listen,
matter.
when I got into seahorses, I had literally like 12 tanks going, but they all had seahorses. I never dove in like Ray did to, making sure they were fed properly by having 10 mysid tanks and all this.
Mhm.
I mean, you are cool, Ray, but nobody else can do
I
that crap.
didn't get
Nobody.
into that just for my own purposes. I got into it because I thought I could make a bit of a business on the side for it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah.
I'd sell some, but it just wasn't worth all the work.
Right.
But
Well, don't forget, guys, we now have U.S. mysids. Herb has been on the show many times, and he's amazing. And he does sell live mysids. So if you're looking for live
Really?
mysids, go to
Mysid
U.S.
or
mysids.
mysid?
Yes.
Do you have links to him on your channel?
Zen, you want to help me out real quick?
Kelly,
'Cause
is
I'm
that
going
mysid
on
or
the fly.
mysid?
Oh,
So
yeah, that's a
let's
good point.
look. U.S. mysids. I'm pretty sure it's mysids.
Brackish or water?
Yeah.
No, that's not it. I'm looking. Holly, you remember he's been on here
Yeah,
before.
I've
Yeah,
bought
it's
them
mysids.
from him before. He's probably in my
So
email.
the only thing I found so far is this.
Yeah, there's a web
Yeah, no,
page.
that's not gonna work.
Here it is.
I'm
U.S.
trying to find it.
mysids. It's mysids with a D.
Oh, it
Thank
is.
you. Good.
Yeah,
That's all.
Yeah.
mysid shrimp.
Share- Put the link in our chat so I can share it in the overall chat, if you would, Holly. If you're able.
That'd be great.
If not, guys, I'll do it as soon as we're done.
Yeah, it's
but
on
yeah.
my phone. I found it on my phone. So I'll type it in. It's really
Okay.
simple. You just put this in your search. U.S. mysids and it'll come up.
Oh, perfect. That's
All right,
easy.
here we go.
Yeah.
U.S. mysids.
You can cultivate mysids like I was cultivating the amphipods if you don't need large amounts. Like I needed larger amounts because I had so many tanks.
Yeah.
You can do smaller amounts just by maybe 15 or 20 liter trays, sterilite trays, and fill it full of rock rubble. And there'll be predation, but still a lot of the young ones will survive to get to the older ones, and it'll build up the population of old ones in there. And then basically you harvest them just by having appropriate mesh that you can sit there, lift the rock up and scoop, and you get them, and you get a lot of detritus too. So then you put them in a cut off pop bottle and let the detritus settle, and then siphon out the mysids same as brine shrimp. You can put a light source there, and the mysis will go to the light source
Mm.
and keep
Yeah.
them away from
Yeah.
sucking up the detritus.
So Theresa, I want to know, because guys, I do have to work at 5 a.m., so I'm
Oh my
not going to last
goodness.
much longer. If you have questions, please ask them now. And Theresa, you're welcome back anytime.
Oh,
Anytime you want
thank
to join,
you.
it's the
That's so
same.
kind of, it's so
It's the
fun.
same link. Yeah, it's the same
Yeah.
link. You can jump in, share, and we want updates on what's going on with your seahorses.
I'll give
But
updates.
my question was, since you already think that your male is pregnant
Yeah.
and you have a 300-gallon tank,
Mm-hmm.
are you going to attempt to leave them in the tank, or are you going to
This
remove them
tank?
and do them? Well, you already said that you have a fry tank set up.
Yeah.
But I
So
would be interested if you left some.
actually, I did wonder about that because there are some ghost shrimp and peppermint shrimp in there. There's going to be predation for sure, but I'm not going to be able to capture every single one. So
Yeah.
I did wonder, would any of them survive in there with the fact that there are the copepods in there and, the small
Yes.
foods that they would eat. So that would be an interesting experiment to see. And if it does, and
I would love it.
I do tend to, I want to say my tank is still young because it hasn't been a full year that it's been up and running yet. But I do like to let algae grow on the back wall just because I think it looks
Yes.
more natural. So, that's another thing. And sometimes the seahorses, they'll grab a little clump of algae from the back wall, hang on with their tail, and then they'll hunt for, different amphipods and things there. The dwarf used to do that all the time in the tank I had. It's actually kind of funny. I think I have some video of that too. But anyway, yeah, thank you very much. I will keep that link then. This was really fun. There's not too many people in the world I can talk to about seahorses who get it. So
Sure. Well, and I can't wait to go check out your channel.
Oh,
And
you are
when
so
you do
kind.
Yeah.
and I'm jealous as heck that you've got fry coming, but I can't wait to see, like, do you plan to raise them and,
Yeah, I'm going to see what I
sell
can
them?
raise. And I'll see if I can trade them with the local fish store for, supplies, frozen mysis, whatever. We'll see what happens. I know that this store, it opened up, I want to say earlier this year, and they can't keep seahorses in stock. They're having trouble getting them. And every time they come in, they sell them, whether they're dwarves or juvenile erectus. So I did kind of put a bug in the ear of the owner there saying, hey, I've got some erectus and I may be having babies in the future. I've been able to raise them. I'm thinking if I can get them to a certain stage, if we could trade. And he goes, yeah, we can talk about it. Ray, you have a thought?
Yeah, a favor I would have to ask of you.
Yeah.
Any store that you want to take them to,
Yeah.
please talk them into separate systems, isolated system to put them in so that these ones that you provide there aren't going to be subjected to pathogens that they haven't already grown up with.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one big killer of
it is.
Of LFS stock.
Yeah, that's true. They keep them in this cube system. I don't think it's connected to other systems. So, but
Gotcha.
they've had
Good.
other things in there. So I don't know if that makes a difference. They don't have they haven't had any seahorses for a few months now, but I'll ask about that. I mean, he seems knowledgeable about fish keeping, so I'll just bring it up. I don't know if
and I would say too, the only thing I would add to that is, once you have the fry and they're to the sellable size, age, whatnot, I have people reach out to me constantly looking for someone selling seahorses. Have you ever shipped? Would you be willing to try?
I'd have to find out more about the shipping because I tried sending some to somebody, the dwarf seahorses when I had a surplus, and it was a little bit more involved than I thought. And because I'm not a business, I think they charge businesses a different rate than they charge people like me, because when I went to go send, it was much, much more expensive than I anticipated. So I just wasn't able to make it work for that person. I don't know if people are willing to pay the price for the shipping if I could manage to do it, but I would have to do some more research on that myself. So,
Well, start researching, because I was going to say I might buy a couple, and I'm willing to pay the shipping. And yeah, I know that I know many other people that would prefer to buy from someone like you, where they know for a fact they're captive bred, where
yeah,
they know for a fact that they're, healthy and eating frozen or whatnot. And they,
well, for,
most
yeah,
of us would absolutely pay the shipping. And I know it's involved, and I know there's risk, and I know there's, no guarantees, and that should be part of your, there's no guarantee here. But I've shipped seahorses, and it's not, I don't know about the dwarfs, but with the Erectus, it's not as scary as it seems. Like Holly shipped me seahorses.
yeah.
I've shipped seahorses to
I may have to
Felicia.
find out from you too, some little packing trips and things like that, packing tips,
Yeah.
and then do the
Yeah,
research.
you could do a video. Since I can't get any videos out, you got to do them all.
Ah!
We'll all go to your channel.
Well, yeah, I could interview the two of you and put you in the video then.
There we go. There we go. Absolutely. Hey, we're ready to, what's the word when you work with another YouTuber?
Collaborate.
That's
Yeah,
it.
it's a
Yeah.
big word in my field. Oh, but look at my tank is starting to go to the night lights. The moonlights are starting to come on.
Yeah, my
Yes.
whole house has gone to the night lights. As
Yeah,
you can see.
the other side is going to turn off soon. I don't know. The one side is always
And
in the
my-
slower. There it is.
And my seahorses are still waiting for dinner because Mom got home late. So, speaking of which,
Yeah,
we are gonna have to call it for tonight, guys. But
sure.
if I missed any questions, if you have any other questions, first of all, definitely check out Theresa's YouTube channel. I put the link in the chat, and I will also put it in the description. Again, Theresa, this was so fun, and we
It
would love
was
to have
fun.
you back.
Yeah,
Any
can't wait to
Wednesday
watch
that
your
you're-
YouTubes when I finally
Yeah,
have.
you are so kind. I just put out stuff that I enjoy. You are all too kind. Really, you are too kind. But thank you.
Well, we would love any Wednesday that you just feel like, hey, I got free time, I want to join them. Jump in, because we'd love
Yeah.
your thoughts and updates, and we'll try to do an episode where we bring her back for updates. But I'm just saying, you can come back any week.
Yeah.
And Ray, glad you're back too, of course. But thank you so much for joining us.
And I've
all
got
of
your
you. Thank
contact
you,
information.
Theresa.
So if I have some major updates, I'll let you know.
Absolutely. All right. Well, sorry guys, I hate to cut it because I know we could go all
No,
night, but
it's good.
I've
It's
got to
good.
work.
I've got to get up.
All right.
Yep, everybody has work tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey,
not Ray,
Holly-
but us.
Holly, help me do Happy Wine.
Oh, I love your glass,
Yes,
Chloe.
yes,
That is so cool.
I collect
yeah, I
tiki
painted that
stuff. I have a
myself.
tiki bar, so I
That
have
is
a lot of
awesome.
fun tiki stuff.
I love
Oh,
it.
we're talking about
And
Holly's
it's
stuff.
empty.
Sorry.
Time to go.
That's it. Mine's empty too. God dang it. All right.
I've got to go
Happy
fill
Wine
one
Wednesday,
right now.
everyone.
That's what I have to do.
Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. We'll be back
All
next
right.
week. We hope Theresa joins us more.